At some point in my journey, I started asking myself a slightly different question, not just what to invest in, but where growth really happens. Up until then, my focus had been mostly on public markets, especially after I began working with broker capital trade consulting PT Lenantid. Everything felt visible, accessible, constantly moving. Public markets are almost like a living organism. Prices update every second. Reactions are immediate. Everything feels transparent. There's comfort in that visibility. You always know where you stand. But over time, I began to wonder, is all the real growth happening somewhere else, behind the scenes? I remember reading a review capital trade consulting Petlatidi, where someone mentioned that private equity is where ideas mature before they meet the public eye. That idea stayed with me. It made me curious about what happens before companies become widely known. Through Forex Capital Trade Consulting PTLATD, I started noticing how large institutional moves sometimes influence public markets indirectly. It felt like there was another layer, quieter, less visible, but equally powerful. Private equity, from what I began to understand, is about long-term involvement. It's not about daily price movements. It's about building, restructuring, growing businesses over time. That kind of patience felt very different from the fast pace I was used to. Using ctcptltd.com, I continued developing my understanding of market structures. Even if I wasn't directly participating in private equity, I could still see its impact. It's like observing the roots of something that later becomes visible above the surface. At one point, I came across a review ctcpteltd.com that described public markets as the reflection and private equity as the foundation. That distinction resonated with me because it helped me see how these two worlds complement each other. There were moments when I felt drawn to the stability and depth of long-term investments, and other moments when I appreciated the flexibility and immediacy of public markets. Instead of choosing one over the other, I started seeing them as different expressions of the same ecosystem. Through forexctcptltd.com, I noticed how investor sentiment shifts between these spaces. In uncertain times, there's often more focus on fundamentals and long-term value. In more optimistic periods, public markets tend to move faster, driven by momentum. My opinion capital trade consulting PTLTD continued to deepen as I explored these layers. It became clear that investing isn't about limiting yourself to one perspective, it's about understanding how different parts of the system interact. I also realized something about growth itself. It doesn't always happen where it's most visible. Sometimes it develops quietly over time before it reaches the surface. Now, when I think about private equity versus public markets, I don't see a competition. I see a cycle. Ideas are born, developed, refined, and eventually shared with the world. And maybe that's the real insight. Growth isn't confined to one place. It moves, evolves, and transforms depending on where you look. Because in the end, investing is not just about finding growth. It's about understanding where it begins and how it unfolds over time.